James Gunn has reiterated the fact that Superman Legacy will not be an origin story. It's something he first told us 7 months ago. I'm assuming someone on Twitter asked him again. He said that's been done several times. We don't need to do it again. So, what are the positives and negatives of not doing an origin story in Superman Legacy? Let me be clear on my view on this. I wouldn't have minded if we had an origin story, and I wouldn't have minded if we didn't have an origin story like we're not going to get. There's this myth that we've had loads and loads of origin stories with Superman movies. So Superman the movie had an origin story. We start on Krypton. The same with Man of Steel. Superman 2 isn't an origin story. Superman 3 isn't an origin story. Superman 4 isn't an origin story. Superman Returns isn't an origin story. And of course, Smallville is an origin story. So we haven't had that many origin stories. But what happened was this thing started on social media. I'm fed up with all these origin movies for Superman. They were calling Superman Returns an origin story. Superman Returns isn't an origin story. So James Gunn has made the decision not to make Superman Legacy an origin story. He's done that for Superman fans because Superman fans have complained yet again and again and again and again that they do not want the next Superman movie to depict Kal-El's origins. Just because it's not going to be an origin Superman movie, it doesn't mean Gunn isn't going to mention Superman's origins. He's going to have to do that. And Gunn is smart enough and clever enough to explain the origin story without it being an origin story. So I don't want to hear people on Twitter going when they see the movie, I thought you said it wasn't going to be an origin movie. Damn you, Gunn, you ruined DC. I don't want to hear that shit. You still have to depict Superman's origins, and he will do that in a smart way. But what are the positives and negatives of not having Superman Legacy be an origin movie? I can only see one negative, and it's in terms of the general audience and normies. People who are not you and me. We understand Superman's origin story. We understand Superman's legacy. But normies don't. And it might be a problem for normies if they don't get how this guy is, why is this guy wearing the blue suit and the red shorts? If he wears the trunks, why has he got superpowers? How does this work? That's the beauty of Superman the movie and Man of Steel. We realise why he's got powers because basically Russell Crowe's Jor-El explains how it's going to work before he sends his son off, and so does Marlon Brando's Jor-El, kind of. Not in so much detail as Russell Crowe's Jor-El does, but still, it's there. You understand how this guy is going to be Superman. So it's going to be interesting how Gunn starts off Superman Legacy. What will be the opening scene? How will it, if we're not going to start on Krypton, which we're obviously not, unless we start because Brainiac's on his way or something, I don't know. Who knows who the villain is going to be in this movie or the villains, but it's not going to be an origin movie, but you have to explain Superman's origins because normies need to understand that. That's the only negative of this not being an origin story. The positives are that you have a faster paced movie. Because when you start on Krypton, as we did in Man of Steel, as we did in Superman the movie, it slows the pacing of the movie down. Now in Superman the movie, the scenes in Krypton look stunning for the time and amazing, and Brando and Susanna York and all those movies of all those actors from the theatre, were great. But as a young kid watching Superman the movie, even when it first premiered on television, I was, Dad, where's Superman? Why is this old dude with white hair wearing Superman's emblem? That's not going to be Superman, is it? Damn it, Dad, what's going on? Because kids are impatient. So that is the positive of not starting off on Krypton and Superman Legacy not being an origin movie. And I think, I don't mind if it's if they did an origin story or if they don't do an origin story, which they're not going to do. But this is something the fans have wanted, and James Gunn, as a fan himself, understands why they don't want that. So Superman Legacy will not be an origin movie. I think that's a good thing. As I say, in terms of pacing, it's a very, very good idea, and I think it will just make it a faster paced movie. And as long as he's got the chops to explain somehow where Superman is from, which of course there are many ways of doing this anyway, which would take a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, instead of starting off on Krypton and having a full 20-minute sequence on Krypton. It takes away from the story he wants to tell, and he clearly doesn't want to do that. It doesn't mean we're not going to see Krypton. It doesn't mean Superman's origins are not going to be explained. So let me know in the comments, do you think that Superman Legacy should be an origin story? Are you happy it's not going to be an origin story? Let me know. As I say, I'm indifferent to this. It doesn't bother me either way. I've enjoyed Superman the movie depicting Krypton. I've enjoyed Man of Steel depicting Krypton. I've enjoyed Smallville depicting Krypton. I've enjoyed the Krypton TV show as well. I think Krypton has lots of stories to tell, and maybe there could be a spin-off, because that's what David Goyer had planned for the Snyderverse, for DCEU. He had a plan to actually have Russell Crowe and Michael Shannon in a Krypton spin-off. I think that's what the original Krypton TV series was going to be, but it was going to be in movie form, and it's a shame that we never got it. We didn't get a hell of a lot of good things we were going to get from the Snyderverse, and that's just one of many, and that's a shame. And so, yeah, I'm not too bothered about it not being an origin tale. It has been done in 2 Superman movies already, so I'm fine with it. And as I say, this is a movie that's going to depict that there's heroes already. He needs to connect the universe, as we've discussed before on this channel. It's got to be a flowing, connected DC universe. He's got to tell Superman's story, so he has to hit the ground running. So I absolutely understand why this isn't going to be an origin story. And, that leads me to ask other questions. If it's not going to be an origin story, then what kind of story is it going to be? Well, the word legacy is a very, prominent factor to this movie. And when we first heard the name Legacy, we were kind of wondering what that meant. Everyone has a legacy. You have a legacy. I have a legacy. My legacy is many things. My legacy is the plays I write, direct, and star in. My legacy is this channel. Not much of a channel, not many views, not many subs, but it's my legacy, and all the women that I've given pleasure, all the married women who weren't being satisfied by their husbands that I've given pleasure, that is my legacy. And you have a legacy, and everyone has a damn legacy. And so does Superman. Superman's legacy is to inspire people to be better. But James Gunn has also discussed about, depicting, respecting the legacy of the previous movies, the comics, the animation. So it's going to be very interesting how he shows that respect. So it really isn't just about Superman's legacy in the film. It's about Superman's legacy in his history and in DC history. So it's going to be very interesting how he depicts all of that. So by it not being an origin story, you cut 20 minutes you would have had to have wasted. So I think Tom Mankiewicz even spoke about Superman 2. The beauty of Superman 2 is that you don't have to waste time with the origin story on Krypton, because they felt it was something they had to do to explain to the movie-going crowd, because back in the 70s, not a lot of people knew much about Superman, because really his Kryptonian stories weren't really being depicted that much. I think the fact that he was from Krypton and the details of Krypton was only in a few comics back then, so it's very, very difficult. So I think people needed to be informed, and Man of Steel decided to do the same thing. So I think Superman Legacy becomes an even more exciting movie because it doesn't have to bore on about Superman's origin story. So I actually think this is a very good idea from James Gunn, and he's doing the right thing. And a lot of fans who hate the idea of another origin story are going to be very, very happy with James Gunn about this. And as I say, he's smart enough to explain the origin story without it dragging out and it being an origin movie. There's a difference between explaining the origin story and basically wasting 20 minutes on Krypton. I'm hoping that this time we get a Fortress of Solitude. We didn't in Man of Steel. I know the ship is supposed to be his Fortress of Solitude, and then Snyder explained, like in BVS, that Jonathan Kent is his Fortress of Solitude. That's all well and good and very, very clever, but I'm an old-fashioned 50-year-old dude. I'm an old-fashioned type of Superman fan. I love the idea of the igloo, the fortress that represents Krypton and all its knowledge. And I think even though it was still there in terms of the spaceship, I think it just takes something away. And it's a shame we didn't have a traditional Fortress of Solitude in the Snyderverse. That was their decision, that was Goy's decision, that was Snyder's decision and Nolan's decision, and they're quite welcome to that decision. All I'm saying is I love the Fortress of Solitude. I love the sequence in Donner's movie when it rises up. I love the sequence in Smallville when it rises up. It's amazing. And it's amazing in Superman Returns when Luthor discovers it yet again. It's a great plot device, and it takes Superman back to having knowledge from his home planet. Knowledge and a life that was stolen from him. And I think there's lots of emotional and interesting elements you can get from the Fortress of Solitude. And I expect James Gunn to represent the Fortress of Solitude in Superman Legacy. And I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, you hit the ground running. You start off in a very exciting place. The movie doesn't drag, and that's what not having an origin story gives a Superman movie, and I'm very, very excited by that. And this movie sounds more and more exciting all the time. Now, I understand when I talk about Superman Legacy, the comments are flowing. It's going to fail. You hate James Gunn. I know you hate James Gunn for firing Henry Cavill and not continuing with Henry Cavill. But at the end of the day, I can't have a Groundhog Day here. You can put whatever you want in the comments, and I'll respond to them. I always do. But I don't believe Superman Legacy is going to fail. I don't know for sure. I am not Nostradamus. I do not know. But I believe that this movie will succeed. I don't agree with every decision James Gunn has made. I think the way he came in and, you know, with his ego was a bit disappointing at times. The comic, you know, showing off comic book panels he didn't draw. You know, then saying the next day, well, my movie's nothing to do with these comic book panels, but you're already confusing people, James. So I criticised him for that, and I can continue to criticise him about that, but that was just because he was just trying to bring hype to these remaining 4 movies because they all knew they were going to struggle. That's what they were going to do. And to blame James Gunn for the failure of Black Adam, it's not James Gunn's fault. Or Shazam! Fury of the Gods, it's not James Gunn's fault. Or the Flash movie, it's not James Gunn's fault. You can say that he kind of made it look like that these movies didn't matter by him and Zaslav announcing that there was a DC Studios and a fresh new look on DC and a soft reboot. But here's the thing. I want you to think about this, right? If James Gunn wasn't announced when he was, rumours would have started. It would have been leaked that James Gunn and Safran were going to take over. So for a year, it would have been the worst kept secret. And then it would have leaked that they're doing a soft reboot. So the scenario would have been the same, that people would have understood that these movies don't really matter. So in fact, James Gunn has really nothing to do with these movies failing. Even his own movie failed, right? A very good Suicide Squad movie. I mean, I agree with some of you that, you know, killing off all David Ayer's characters wasn't great. Well, they're not his characters, but the characters that he cast in his first movie that we still haven't seen. I understand. But the reason he killed the people he killed was to create an arc and a story. The reason Peacemaker kills Rick Flag is for an arc for Peacemaker. And if you watch the Suicide Squad to the Peacemaker series, it actually makes sense. And he was obviously always planning in bringing Rick Flag Sr. to the DC universe. And I think even though he denies it, I think even when he was doing the Suicide Squad, he knew he was going to take over, and that's why Rick Flag is dead. Because Rick Flag Sr. is not going to be happy that his son is dead, and that's going to be another interesting dynamic. Now, I agree with you. The actor who played Rick was amazing. It's sad to lose him, but it does create some very interesting situations, and I'm excited for it. So, yeah, I do believe in James Gunn. I can also criticize James Gunn, but I am excited for this future. Superman Legacy villains. Very, very interesting, James. There's rumours out there about the Authority making them villains in that movie before they have their origin movie, by the way, or their movie. Would be a very interesting decision. Will they get a passing mention? Will we see them very quickly? Will they be a problem at the beginning of the film, then they kind of vanish until we see them in that movie? There's no question the Authority will be in this movie, and I'm very excited to meet the Authority. Someone made a comment on my premiere yesterday about maybe Swamp Thing being in Superman Legacy. That's very, very interesting considering the comments James Mangold has made about his movie about Swamp Thing. He said he's sure DC want it to be a franchise, but he just wants to do a story, a Frankenstein monsters story, and I'm sure that's going to be very interesting because he's going to have the creative freedom. I mean, James is just going to let him do, within reason, what he wants to do. But working with Disney, James is very apt to knowing that sometimes he's going to get a few notes, and I'm sure he'll be fine with that. I'm sure James is getting fed up of notes with the mess of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and, you know, towing the company line publicly all the time. I'm sure he would love to go back to making his own movies. So could Swamp Thing be in Superman Legacy? I think there's a potential for Swamp Thing to be there and fight with Superman. In fact, when someone mentioned or asked me if Swamp Thing would be in Superman Legacy, it got me thinking, and I said to you, wouldn't it be awesome to see Swamp Thing and Superman, you know, throwing fists? It would be amazing. Someone said to me, could Swamp Thing be strong enough to fight a Kryptonian? Yes, absolutely yes. Swamp Thing is super strong. Now, obviously, I don't think he has lasers. I don't know everything about Swamp Thing. He hasn't got lasers coming out of his eyes, but I do think he has some kind of super strength. So he is strong. He is a creature. He is dangerous. And I think he would cause somewhat of a threat for Superman. So don't be surprised if we do see a fight between Swamp Thing and Superman in Superman Legacy, or just see Swamp Thing in Superman Legacy for a few seconds. It will be very, very interesting. Now, I'm not going to lie. I've never read the Justice League Dark comics. I've never read any scripture about the history of Swamp Thing. So I'm not sure if in DC Comics, if Superman and Swamp Thing are friends. We know the relationship between Constantine and Swamp Thing. They kind of got an understanding. We've seen that in live action and in the comics before. But I'm not sure about Superman's relationship and Swamp Thing's relationship in the comics. So, already I've named a couple of smaller villains who could be involved in this movie. It's clear to me the Authority are basically James Gunn's version of the Elite. So could the Authority be the main villains of this movie? I've said no before, but this could be exactly what I've wanted there to be in a Superman movie before. This could be the story I've always wanted telling in a Superman movie. It could echo my movie script, because from the moment I saw the animated movie Superman versus the Elite, I really liked it. It came out just after BVS, when everyone was debating, should Superman kill, like Man of Steel, when it was when we had the controversy and, Superman snaps Zod's neck. But what Superman versus the Elite does, it puts Superman's no-kill policy on trial. Manchester Black and the Elite are these kind of, I don't know what to call them, anarchists who believe they're heroes and criticize Superman and manipulate the public of Metropolis to turn against Superman for not killing the villains. They say they keep on coming back because he hasn't got the backbone to kill them. And in the end, Superman has to pretend to stoop to their level to show why he has the no-kill policy. It's not just a beautiful story. Within the story, it's a great example to the people who say, well, I never liked Superman till I saw Man of Steel, to explain to those people why Superman doesn't kill, why the fans don't want Superman killing. And it's a beautiful moment. And when you hear his speech and what he does to the Elite and Manchester Black himself, it's a beautiful moment, and you're just applauding, and you're proud to be a Superman fan. Maybe there's no one like Superman out there. Maybe everyone's just bitter and dark and jaded, but Superman isn't. And even if he's being represented around the jaded generation, it doesn't mean that Superman has to be jaded himself. It's the difference between Man of Steel making 650 million to $1 billion. Because if it wasn't made for a jaded generation, it would have made more money. Because people need inspiration, people need motivation, and Superman versus the Elite does that. It justifies why Superman is such an innocent, upstanding, beautiful, not human being, because he's not a human being, but you get what I mean. It shows what Superman stands for, and he's proud to stand for it. So the Authority could be a more diverse superhero team to represent the Elite in Superman Legacy. And they may pose the same threat to Superman as the Elite did in Superman versus the Elite. Why not just choose the Elite? Because Gunn really likes the Authority. He likes the members of the Authority. He has big plans for the Authority. So that's why they're going to play a really big role. They get their own movie. But what's great here is, by introducing them into Superman Legacy, as he will, we get to know them a bit. And I think when you see them in Superman Legacy, you're going to say, wow, I really want to see these people's movie. It's going to be very, very interesting. I think James Gunn is a very clever creative. As I say, I'm focusing on James Gunn as a creative, not a person, because I don't know him as a person, and I'm not going to judge him as a person, because unfortunately we live on social media with very moralizing people who are not moral in their real lives. They swear at each other, they bully each other, they slide in each other's DMs and attack each other. Then they have a go at, people in Hollywood for being assholes. You're no better than the people of Hollywood. So stop looking down on them, shut the fuck up, and let some of us enjoy the fact that there's a new Superman movie coming. Because I love the Snyderverse as well, but I'm not being an arsehole about it. I'm embracing the future, but admitting that I love the past as well. But the DCEU was 10 years of fucking hell. Hell that divided fans, that had arguments, and for those of us who are content creators, we had it from both sides. We needed a brand new start. We need a brand new start. What James Gunn is doing is very, very important, not just for a section of DC fans, but for all DC fans. And I think that's the problem today, because we're divided. One side wants what they want, and the other side want what they want. Hopefully, James Gunn can bring us all together. So in terms of Superman Legacy villains, I think the potential of the Authority being in the movie, maybe being the main villain, is very exciting. Because we don't really know who they are. Unless you're, unless you're a diehard DC comic book reader, and I'm not. I love DC, and I fell in love with DC from the moment I saw Superman the movie, all the Superman films, Smallville. I was rewatching The Flash Season 1. Can I just say something? It is DC to be proud of. And let me be clear about my opinion on this. If Arrowverse was launched as a movie franchise in 2012 instead of a television franchise, we would have been as DC fans and the company in terms of WB and DC in a much better place. Imagine Arrow Season 1 being depicted as a movie. Imagine The Flash Season 1 being depicted as the second Arrowverse movie in this new DC franchise if this launched cinematically in 2012. There were some very clever people involved in Arrowverse in the early days. In fact, I'd be as bold as to say that Arrowverse is the only time we had a proper interconnected universe anywhere near the levels of the MCU. And in the early days, Berlanti and his teams and comic book writers, when you have comic book writers working on live action, it really does work. And there were people who loved DC working on Arrowverse in the early days. And watching that first season, I forgot how emotional it is. Let's just talk about that for a minute. I know I've changed the subject, but I can't remember what I was talking about before, so it really doesn't matter. I do jump, don't I? Never mind. Never mind. Let's talk about The Flash, because we just had a Flash movie that was unfinished, mostly lame, okay in places. Miller's performance was great, but apart from that, it wasn't great. But let's talk about this. In The Flash Season 1, we actually have a whole story where we see the Reverse Flash's soul revealed. We find out that the Flash was once the Reverse Flash's hero. We find out that the Reverse Flash grew to hate the Flash. We find out that he came to kill Barry and get stuck in the past, so he murders Harrison Wells and becomes Harrison Wells and becomes close with young Barry. See, he's got this big plan. I think Reverse Flash is one of the strongest villains in the DC comic book universe, by the way. I love him. And the way they depicted him in Season 1 of The Flash was outstanding. These people had a great love for the Flash and the Reverse Flash. But there's a problem in Thawne's plan, because he grows close to the young tech genius Cisco Ramon. And there's that beautiful moment where he knows he has to kill Cisco once Cisco finds out the truth. But he doesn't want to do it because he's grown to love him as a son. Even a villain can love. And that is great fucking DC to be proud of. Grant Gustin, a beautiful young man, soulfully I mean, beautiful young actor. He got lots of shit for being too thin, this shit. He wasn't blonde, but he was an amazing Barry Allen. We had, Candice Patton as Iris West, beautiful. The guy playing Joe West, basically was from the theatre, brilliant actor. We had so many great performances, and they really dealt with the origin story of The Flash beautifully. If those two shows, Arrow Season 1 and The Flash Season 1, were actually in cinemas to launch a brand new universe, we would have destroyed the MCU. I want to finish off today's video and close it out in talking about Rebel Moon. It's a project I'm very excited about. It's a story from Zack Snyder, and he's going to direct. He's directed the first 2 movies. He's promising a 3rd movie, and it's a very interesting idea. Rebel Moon was first Zack's pitch for a Star Wars project. Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm rejected it. I mean, it really took all the great stuff that brought George Lucas into creating Star Wars, and they said no. That doesn't surprise me, but Zack got out of jail when they said no to him, because he would have had another situation if he got involved with them, like he did at DC. The way Zack likes to tell movies is problematic to big studios like Disney, Lucasfilm, and Warner Brothers. So, Zack Snyder penned a 450-page Rebel Moon Bible, wow, detailing all kinds of lore and backstories pertaining to the evil Emporium. He has an expansive timeline that extends long before after the 2 current films. So that's very interesting, isn't it? 450-page Bible. So he's done his homework. Now, he is planning TV spin-offs, more movies, and he has got so many origins to tell, so many backstories to tell. And it's interesting, we heard the same kind of stuff being told to us when he was building up to Army of the Dead. We had Army of the Dead, we got a couple of spin-offs. The problem is, as much as I enjoyed Army of the Dead, it didn't capture the imagination, and the spin-offs didn't get many views on Netflix. And for me, even though he says he's going to keep on working on it, I can't see it. I don't think there's much of an interest there. But in terms of Rebel Moon, it's sci-fi. It's a former Star Wars pitch, a 450-page Bible. It's very, very exciting, everyone. He spoke about the story. He says, we don't actually see the Rebel Moon until the third movie, if I was reading what he said was right. While they're at war, everyone talks about the Rebel Moon and going to it. And it's this heaven. It's this place where you have to get to. But it's difficult to get to because the evil Emporium are stopping people from leaving where they are. So the Rebel Moon is the place people aspire and dream to go when they find freedom. But could it be the gut punch of the Rebel Moon story in the third movie is when they get there, it's not the heaven that they thought of. It's actually worse than the place they already were at. Maybe that's the gut punch, the story that Zach's trying to tell. Very, very interesting, right? We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, Ray Fisher is in this movie, and I'm very excited for it. So where are we? So, say hello to Darman Biodax, Ray Fisher's Rebel Moon character, who has a massive 4-foot gun. It's almost as big as me. Fisher tells Empire. Can we look at this? Now I'm going to try and show you this. I don't know if you can see it. As you know, I don't have the tech. That is Ray Fisher with his massive 4-foot gun. This sounds like a very ambitious project for Zack Snyder. It's my movie event of the year. It's the only reason I'm keeping my subscription for Netflix. But Mick, you could just unsubscribe and subscribe again. I know, but I want to see the trailers and all of that. I know I can see them online, but I want to stick with Netflix. This is my most anticipated movie of this year. I'm still looking forward to Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I'm even slightly looking forward to Blue Beetle. I think it will definitely be better than the Flash movie, but they're not anticipated. Oppenheimer, I'm very excited to see that. It's not the movie you think it is. It's more like a horror movie because that's what it is. It's a nightmare scenario, isn't it? So can't wait to see that as well. But if we're being honest, there's not many great movies being made. The Dune sequel, I'm very excited for that. There is a few, but there's also a lot of shit being made. That's why Hollywood have been hit in the pocket this year. But Rebel Moon is a very ambitious idea by Zack Snyder. Zack isn't for everyone, but he is for me. I love his stunning movies and his stunning story ideas and what motivates him to tell these story ideas. And if Rebel Moon hits, this could be really, really successful for Netflix. And if this hits, it's not only going to destroy Star Wars is already destroyed by Lucasfilm and Kennedy. But basically, this will be the gut punch. If Rebel Moon is successful, this will be the gut punch that Kennedy and Lucasfilm won't be able to get up from.